All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the next episode of our driver career mode here in F123. And it was a very intense race last episode in Singapore. And I know I said it earlier in the season, but Singapore was definitely one of the hardest ones that I have fought for, especially with the gap between myself and the top three, and then ending up finishing, I believe, P3. If you guys remember, you guys can go ahead and watch that video if you guys haven't already. But I believe, actually, I can actually check it. Yes, it was a P3 finish with the fastest lap, so we got an extra point. And George Russell wins, and then Lando Norris P2 in Singapore. And we're 7 races to go. And we did go in for our last gearbox, because I don't want to risk going into this weekend and having an engine failure. So with our engine degradation, I'm feeling pretty confident that this gearbox can last us till the very end, and I'm sure we'll get some more penalties later on within these last 7 races. But we're feeling pretty good about that. And R&D progress is going pretty well. Our car, we're outperforming our car basically at this point, as we're dropped back down to 7th for the R&D standings. And yeah, so we still have some work on the aero side to go over. And got a message here: weekend preview, development, weather, next year's regulations. So next season, we will be power is a beast, so I expect them to get voted through. It's going to hit more or less every area of the car in minor ways. Next year, I recommend investing resources in other areas of the car. So we're going to be having, well, it's automatic, so we won't have to deal with that. But regulation changes coming towards the end of the season, probably towards the powertrain. He didn't really say anything specific. Fair amount of support for change. So who knows what we will see a change in for next season. That'll probably change up the grid, because Mercedes is just slightly ahead of Red Bull, and then McLaren's right there in the mix, and Ferrari's not too far behind. But we're going to be here in Japan this weekend. We already did our time trials, get our setup ready to go, and we will see you guys after practice for qualifying. All right, so we're out in Q2 this time. If you guys saw, in the first qualifying, we went full a 3-lap session. We needed to make sure, and we got provisional P4 off of what I think was a low 131, if I remember. I don't remember it quite, but it was a few seconds ago for you guys to see. I was wondering about Charles Leclerc because he DNF'd. I didn't get to see the message when he DNF'd, because I was focusing on my laps. I only had one set of soft tires because we're on a balanced tire set this weekend. So we get a mediums for Q2. So we did a double run on the soft tires, and not really any improvement from that second lap on those softs, because the heat 131.371 is going to be starting us in P12 before any penalties get added on. But Charles Leclerc does get knocked out in Q2 technically because of the DNF. He is not able to continue on through Q3 because they have to work on the car. So he'll probably be getting some penalties. As we did see a DNF from Q1. Or I don't know if that was Q1 or practice, but we will see the penalties here in a second as we go on to the main event.
The beloved Suzuka had a couple of unplanned years away from the calendar, but it's now back where it belongs, at the heart of the Formula One season. Welcome along to the Japanese Grand Prix. A lap of this historic racetrack covers 3.6 miles. It's the only time during the season that we race on a figure-of-8 circuit. And the drivers can expect some intense G-forces through the 18 corners on offer here as they experience some of the highest average apex speeds on the Formula One calendar. Keep an eye out for overtakes into the final chicane. Before we begin, let's take a quick look at the grid lineup for today's race. Lando Norris will lead us away from pole position, and starting next to them is George Russell. Considering the rest of the grid, we have Verstappen, Perez, Gasly, Oscar Piastri, Sainz, Leclerc, Ocon, Hamilton, Johnson, Zhou, Bottas, Stroll, Hülkenberg, Magnussen, Fernando Alonso, De Vries, Sargent and Yuki Tsunoda. Which of these talented drivers will come out on top today? And alongside me once again for coverage of today's race is none other than the great Anthony Davidson. Why don't we kick off by discussing Max Verstappen? That was a great podium in the last race. Can they keep that momentum going this weekend?
It's always nice to come into a Grand Prix weekend on a high, but your expectations are based much more on your practice and qualifying runs. So it's the momentum from those sessions that they'll be hoping to carry into the race today.
Okay, here we go. I know what you can do. Don't let me down.
All right, so we're feeling pretty confident coming into this race after that. And the weather is going to be cooler towards the end of the race. So we're going to go with the medium and see what we can do. So let's get right to it. All right, so this time around we actually went with the soft to medium. And I believe a pit stop on lap 10, if I could remember. We're starting P11 behind Hamilton. Ocon is going to be in front of us. As Hamilton's on hards. We're on softs. Joe and Bottas are on softs behind us.
Okay, good parking there, mate. Now we need to make sure we get a great launch as the race starts.
And we do end up getting off to a great launch. But unfortunately, I was having some computer issues. So we had to end up... I ended up losing the first half of the race. Up to, I believe, lap 8 or lap 9. So we're going to go ahead and transition over to then and there. Lap 8, we did make 2 positions up to P9. As we're less than a second behind Sergio Perez. And we did manage to get ahead of Hamilton after a pretty scarce start on the turn 1. But lap 8 now, not really any position changes that I remember. But Leclerc back in P20 for some damage off of turn 1. And lap 9 is when we're able to get close enough to Sergio Perez, but we end up coming in for our first pit stop. So it was a lap 9 pit stop off of the softs, and then pretty much 10-11 laps on the medium tires. And that is Lewis Hamilton coming in right behind us into the second pit box as we're dropping down the order as Ocon, Sargent, Hülkenberg, all of them stay out as they're on different tire compounds, I believe. As we're coming out of the pits, still a decent distance between us and Hamilton as we basically slot into P15 behind Charles Leclerc as he made an early pit stop after lap 1 incident. And it's we're already over halfway done with the race, unfortunately, because we did lose that first half of the race, like I said. But you can see trying to get in the grips with these new tires. And at the end of lap 10, we have some more position changes with other pit stops. Trying to stay on the racing line as best as possible. as we do still have Hamilton behind us, and that cut, the undercut, overcut, I don't know really what it was. Sergio Perez went in on lap 11, and we're still about a second, less than a second behind him, so we're still fighting for that position to pass him, getting up into P9. As we're back on after this, after that pit stop, you can see how close we get, and we end up going wide here out of the S's, and we lose a lot of that ground. There was a lot of gaining and losing ground throughout this race, as we have Hamilton closing in as we're coming up to the hairpin, and we had some decent pace. I thought we were doing really well coming out of that corner with Perez, as we closed the gap within less than half a second. We have 2.28 there, you saw for a split second, as we're coming around, and I've been having trouble in this last sector, this long double left-hander. A little bit of wheel spin there, and we go into the gravel. So it really ruins our chances here as Hamilton tries to make a move. We move out of the way, a little bit of an unsafe block as we take a little bit of grass there. But we do end up holding that outside line. We don't let off the brakes, and we do hold position against Lewis Hamilton in P10 as we're rounding out the end of lap 11 here in Japan. As we're now about a second back behind Perez, so we're just out of DRS, so there's not really any ground to cover as of yet, as we're still trying to defend against Lewis Hamilton. And there's not really going to be much more of this race because Hamilton is basically putting the pressure on the entire time. We knocked it down to about 2.3 seconds now as Hamilton tries to make a move on the outside. Perez, just the pace on that Red Bull, just getting away and away and away, as we're still lap 13 fighting to defend against Hamilton. As you can see the Overcast clouds, as we're actually technical 5-car fight for P9, as a Grand Joe splits the Aston Martins of Alonso and Stroll. As Hamilton did make that pass on us on the straight for the DRS, so lap 14 now. Alonso is behind us, Joe behind him, and we ended up going wide in that same corner. Alonso is wide. We get a warning for contact when we missed our braking point, so we get a warning for contact with Alonso as he's trying to make a move. I don't know why we were given that warning. Well, there's not really going to be much of a change throughout the rest of the race, as we're still now losing ground against Lewis Hamilton. But the next lap, Esteban Ocon up in P6 coming through Sector 2. You can see smoke coming from his car. He was told to retire the car, and it was an unsafe area in my perspective. But he was near an escape, as they don't pull out a safety car. And that's basically going to be the rest of the race. We are still in P10. We are now defending against Lance Stroll. He managed to make a position against Alonso, or make a position against some of the other drivers like the Hasses, as Alonso gets up in the... there he is, back in P12. As we're going to be rounding out the end of the race in P10.
A brilliant win on the beloved figure-of-8 circuit. Anthony Davidson, what helped them deliver this result, do you think?
Well, they certainly stood out as a driver with tons of confidence on the track. I think their ability to keep their cool, even during some of the more hectic parts of the race, meant they were able to capitalise on the mistakes of other drivers, giving them the opportunity to make their way to the top spot with ease.
Red Bull put up an outstanding fight for the front position today, and it's great to see it paid off for them. They do so much for the sport that you can't help but be delighted by today's race win. And now let's take a look at the driver's standings. Well, not the result our points leader would have wanted, but it certainly makes things interesting going forward. Now, let's discuss, Ant. Who would you say is a contender for driver of the day?
Max Verstappen seemed to just effortlessly weave through the other drivers today without a care in the world. He was definitely my driver of choice.
It's time to see how things are shaping up in the Constructors' Championship. No change in the top spot then, but with today's points, their hold on that lead is getting weaker. And with that, we wrap up another weekend of motorsport action. But with more races lined up, be sure to join us when we come back with more Formula One.
All right, so pretty good finish today for us. We did get bumped up to P11 at the start because of the penalty, and then we finished in P10. We were trying to stay with Sergio Perez for so long, and we just couldn't keep grips to our. We couldn't keep the grip to our racing line, and we just kept losing time. And it got to the point where I had to defend against the Aston Martins of Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll, which I was able to fend off Lance Stroll there within the last few laps. He did catch up there towards the last lap, and so, but we did manage to score 1 point. And then I was really hoping for a full safety car with that DNF from Esteban Ocon. Let's go ahead and see what happened if it was terminal damage. Esteban Ocon. Esteban Ocon mechanical failure DNF on lap 15. And then we got a track limit warning there in sector 1, I believe, or sector 2. I don't quite remember. But yes, a single point for this weekend in Japan, as we're looking forward to Qatar in the next video. Qatar is a new track. I have not driven on it. I don't have any previous data to go off of from the previous game, or all I have is a setup video that I'm going off of, and I'm going to be adjusting that in time trial. So we'll see you guys in the next episode for Qatar, as we're nearing the end of our season 1 with Williams. So we're really looking good right now. So we will see you guys in the next episode.